Hello and welcome to the second public plenary of the GSA 4G-5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum. We have a packed agenda today, so very quickly some housekeeping before we get into the meat of the day. You will be receiving a copy of the recording of this event in an email immediately afterwards, so don't worry if you miss a little bit, you'll be able to see a full recording immediately afterwards. Similarly, you can download the presentations at any time during the event. If you move your mouse over the picture of the presentation, you should see a little download button. You can download the PDF for the presentations. We also invite you to ask questions during the event, so please do pose any questions as we go on using the questions tab. We'll be putting questions to our speakers throughout the presentations and the roundtable discussions, so we can use those to help inform those discussions. I say we have got a packed agenda, so to kick things off properly, I'll hand over to Joe Barrett, President of GSA, to get things going. Joe.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome everybody. As he said, this is the second event. The first one was very well received, and so let's move on with this one. As we said, we've got a lot to get through today. So first of all, hopefully everybody knows a great deal about GSA. We've been around since 1998. We've been around since 1998 and representing the mobile ecosystem. There's been many developments over the past few years, especially the expansion of the Gambot database, where we are collecting industry data to share with the industry. A lot of that is free for people to download, but also detailed information is available for our members and associates who subscribe to get access to all that data. I'm not sure what's happening with all the slides moving, but there we go. We have a very large spectrum group, over 150 participants from our members split into ITU regions, India also now added, that are advocating the release of spectrum and usage for mobile networks, providing education and support for consultations, and a number of working groups, including this one, the fixed wireless access, and also private networks and others that we instigate as those topics become interesting to the industry. So without further ado, let me pass on to Simon, sorry, to Julian, who will take us forward for the next part of this session. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joe. So I'm Julien Grivola, and I am the chair for the GSA 4G-5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum. I'm the chair for 2021. I'm also the director of wireless industry development at Huawei, and I would like to wish you a warm welcome from my side to this second event. Actually, we had the first one 6 months ago, so it's really a good time for an update. Many things have happened in the fixed wireless access domain since then. So it's a good occasion to catch up. But let me first put a little bit of context here. So connected and connected has already been a fundamental priority for all of us. And we believe 4G, 5G fixed wireless access can play a key role in this domain. And as we have seen with the pandemic, actually, the need for connectivity has never been greater. And many regions or many governments are now considering connectivity as a new commodity. Nevertheless, there is still lots of things to be done. According to the ITU State of Broadband report that was published last month, I think, there are still 3.7 billion people who are not connected. And in fact, also with the COVID-19, as you can see on the slide here, we can also consider that the digital divide has even widened, because for those who have connectivity, a good portion have very poor quality connectivity. So for all these people, fixed wireless access can be a life changer. And today we see with lots of recovery plans being promoted by different countries or regions like the European Commission. We see this as an opportunity to really try to close the digital divide, and we believe fixed wireless access should be a real and critical tool into this broadband connectivity equation. So people, you know, they don't need 10 or 20 gigabit per second in 10 years. They need a reliable, high-speed, 100 megabit per second connectivity tomorrow. And the benefit of fixed wireless access is really this time to market and TCO, low TCO capability. So if we move to the next slide, you can see that we have created this fixed wireless access forum less than a year ago, so we don't even have 1 year age. And the idea was that, of course, fixed wireless access is known, but we have noticed that there is still a huge lack of education. You know, what the real benefits are, how big the market is, where can you find the devices, how many suppliers you can find on the market, you know, what kind of benefits can be delivered, what is the real maturity of the technology in this 4G or 5G flavor. So we created the forum, and we have been quite successful so far. We have expanded quite quickly, actually. In 10 months, we moved from less than 20 companies to 44 members. As you can see on the slide, all the leading players are involved, from the infrastructure side to the CPE module and chipset front. And if you can look on the top right corner, you can see that the lion's share is, of course, represented by the CPE vendors, which is completely in line with our objectives. If we move to the next slide, I would like to take the opportunity of the few minutes I have to maybe introduce two deliverables or milestones we have achieved since the creation. The first one is probably already known by many of you. It is this document where you can find information on the device ecosystem companies who are part of the forum. You will find a quick profile and also a selection of their key products. You will not find all the products, but the ones that are key and marketed most intensively by those players. So we have a good news, because today we have actually updated for the first time our document. It's available for download on the GSA website. And compared to the previous version that was published in June, end of June, one key change is probably the proportion of 5G devices in the list of devices we have in this document. The proportion moved from 30% to 41%. So this is really highlighting one of those key trends we are seeing right now on the market. The second key deliverable I would like to mention is the device market survey we have published. This one is, in my opinion, a very significant milestone. Actually, 25 CPE vendors who are members of the forum agreed to share under strict confidentiality rules. You can imagine, to share shipment information so that we can collect this information, anonymized, of course, to give a sense to the industry observers, regulators, operators of the scale of the market. And if I will take maybe just one piece of information, if you look at the cumulative shipments over the 29 to 21 period, you will see that 73 million CPEs are expected to be shipped. While if you add also the portable Wi-Fi type of routers, we are around 110 million. This is really important because as part of this forum, of course, we are representing a significant share of the market, but not the full share, and not all the vendors have contributed to this survey. So this is really kind of defining some sort of baseline of what could be the installed base of fixed wireless access globally using 4G and 5G. This report is also available for download on the GSA website. I will not take more time to explain what we have achieved within the forum and move straight to our event, which is also a key part of our activities. So today, we will have first a session about the market insight, where the GSA Research and Plum Consulting will provide and share their analysis, followed by the service provider session, where US Cellular and Imagine will share their best practices or their experience with fixed wireless access so far. The session number 3 will be dedicated to regulation in Latin America. So we will have a keynote from SUBTEL, followed by the participation in a panel of 4 regulators from Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Mexico. And finally, I will be back to moderate the 4th session, where the GCF will be involved, so Global Certification Forum, and 3 members, CPE vendors, Asia Telco, Insingo, and SUBTEL. And finally, John, the vice chair of the forum, will give some closing remarks. This event has been possible thanks to the support of some of our members, so Asia Telco, Insingo, SUBTEL. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank them again. Without them, we would have not been in a position to do the event today. We will have now a short video from Insingo, and then we will move to the event. Richard, please.
Thanks so much. And I invite Simon Sheridan from GSA to take us through some of the meat of today's session.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As introduced, I'm Simon Sherrington, and I lead the GSA's research activity. And as a prelude to the further presentations and roundtable activities that are scheduled today, I'm going to present some GSA research on fixed wireless access networks and devices to set the scene. GSA publishes a wide range of research in the form of reports, presentations and databases covering the growth of the LTE and 5G technology ecosystems. And fixed wireless access devices and networks form an increasingly important part of that. GSA's research focuses on fixed wireless access services delivered using LTE and 5G technologies only. So we don't include information about fixed wireless access services based on other technologies such as WiMAX, LMDS, or proprietary point-to-multipoint technologies. There are some of those other network types out there, but the growth we're seeing in terms of service availability is coming from the introduction of fixed wireless access services using LTE and 5G. So if we look at the data on this slide, which is drawn from some of our ongoing research program, if you include residential or business offers, GSA has identified more than 480 operators in 178 countries or territories that are investing in fixed wireless access based on LTE or 5G. And when I say investing, I include those that are involved in trials, pilots, deployments, commercial launches, or in some cases investment in fixed wireless access licenses, so the permits to enable them to launch such services. We're only including public network services in those counts. There are more companies providing solutions for private mobile and industrial networks based on fixed wireless access. Out of all those that we've identified as investing in fixed wireless access, GSA has catalogued available service offers for using fixed wireless access over LTE or 5G from 437 operators in 171 countries or territories. That's up from 430 operators when we reported on this a few months ago. But note that's net adds, so the figures hide a few mergers and acquisitions or market withdrawals. At 437 operators, that's more than half of all LTE or 5G operators worldwide. And in addition, we're tracking a handful of 5G fixed wireless access soft launches, instances where the launch has been announced, but as far as we can tell, there are no devices or subscriptions available to let customers use the networks. And as you can see from the map, there are relatively few countries or territories now without an identified LTE or 5G fixed wireless access service offer. I think it's fair to say fixed wireless access is now a mainstream service. If we look a bit closer at the regional spread of service availability, Europe's the region with the highest number of identified LTE or fixed wireless access services, 161 of them. Just to note there that some operators are counted twice in the pie chart statistics if they are marketing both LTE fixed wireless access and 5G fixed wireless access services separately on their website. Middle East and Africa follows a close second. If we look at sub-regions, sub-Saharan Africa is a particular hotspot where we've got many local fixed wireless access providers delivering broadband services alongside the mobile operators that are moving into this sector of the telecoms market. And the numbers of suppliers there have been boosted by local wireless internet service providers that have migrated to LTE or sometimes 5G from alternative technologies and now offer fixed wireless access based on LTE or 5G as one of their service options. Looking a bit closer at fixed wireless access within the context of wider LTE network deployment now, we get a real sense of the importance of fixed wireless access within the LTE market. By September, GSA had identified over 900 operators in over 240 countries or territories that had stated plans to or are actively investing in LTE for public networks. And of those, nearly 800, 796 operators in 240 countries or territories had launched LTE networks providing public services. If you look at the charts shown here, we're probably getting close to the maximum number of LTE networks we'll see. New launches are still happening, but are often offset by other movements within the market, such as mergers and acquisitions. But of those 796 operators, one area where we are seeing steady growth, 429 operators in 169 countries or territories have now launched 3GPP compliant LTE fixed wireless access services. That means over half, nearly 54% of all LTE operators now offer a fixed wireless access service. And there are an additional 25 operators that we've identified that are investing in LTE fixed wireless access, including 9 that are actively deploying the technology. So taking the total number of operators investing in LTE fixed wireless access, including all relevant trials, license acquisitions, etc., as well as those deploying and offering services, up to 454. That's up from 429 a year ago. If we look at 5G, the development of the 5G market is happening really quickly. GSA has identified 466 operators in 139 countries or territories investing in 5G. And of those, a total of 180 operators in 72 countries or territories that have launched one or more 3GPP compliant 5G services. Within that, 123 operators in 60 countries or territories are investing in 5G fixed wireless access. That's more than a quarter of those investing in 5G in general, and up from fewer than 100 last November. GSA has also counted 65 operators in 35 countries that have launched 3GPP compliant 5G fixed wireless access services. That's up from 53 operators in 30 countries and territories 6 months ago. So that means more than a third, 36% of 5G operators are known to have introduced 5G fixed wireless access too. It's clear from the geographical map that the picture of investment is a bit less global than LTE at the moment. GSA is yet to identify operators investing in 5G fixed wireless access in large parts of Africa and the Asia Pacific, but services seem likely to follow there as 5G deployment spreads through those regions. As well as tracking networks and services, GSA maintains an extensive database on vendors and their LTE and 5G devices, its Gambod database. Looking at the data that holds, it's clear that the CPE side of the LTE and 5G fixed wireless access market is thriving. Gambod now contains end-user devices of a variety of form factors from over 900 manufacturers, and from within that group, GSA has identified over 100 vendors with announced, available, or forthcoming fixed wireless access devices. GSA's catalogued LTE fixed wireless access devices, so those that are either commercially available or expected, from 93 vendors. That's up from 84 only 6 months ago. And Gambod also contains data on announced 5G fixed wireless access CPE devices, commercial or expected, from 66 vendors. And those vendors have been busy. 740 LTE fixed wireless access CPE devices have now been recorded in the Gambod database, which represents just over 3.5% of all the LTE devices we've ever identified, and up from 628 devices in March this year, so quite a significant growth. And I would add that industrial grade CPE is excluded from this figure. We do track those sorts of devices separately, but they're not counted in the statistics I'm showing you today. Looking at the growth of LTE fixed wireless access CPE devices in Gambod, 224 have been added so far in 2021. That's a 43.4% increase. Meanwhile, the 5G fixed wireless access equipment market has been growing quickly too. GSA has now identified 188 announced 5G fixed wireless access CPE device models. That's up more than a third, 36% from 138 in March 2021, and up more than 100% in a year. 115 of those announced devices are indoor devices and 73 are outdoor devices. We believe there are now nearly 90 commercially available 5G fixed wireless access CPE device models, up nearly double from around 47 that we'd identified in March this year and from fewer than 20 that we knew about a year ago. So really strong growth in the number of devices becoming commercially available. So these figures clearly demonstrate device manufacturers are increasingly bringing new fixed wireless access CPE products to market to satisfy the demand for LTE and 5G fixed wireless access, meaning there's an increasingly good choice for operators and customers to use. That choice of device models is being reflected in shipments too. The figures shown here are from the GSA 4G-5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum survey that Julian mentioned a few minutes ago, the 4G-5G Fixed Wireless Access CPE market survey for 2021. And as Julian mentioned, the purpose of the forum is really to educate the industry about the market. There have been very few agreed market definitions, lack of information, and no real consensus on the volume of device shipments or installed base. And the survey was designed to address that issue. We had 25 CPE vendors answering the first edition, and we think this is a significant representation of the 3GPP-based market, and their responses show strong momentum for that market. Respondents were asked to indicate how many units were shipped for different form factors in 2020, growth compared to 2019, and their expected growth for 2021. And the cumulative combined shipments across 2019 and 2020 for 4G, 5G fixed wireless indoor and outdoor CPEs was estimated at 42.3 million units, and the cumulative value is expected to exceed 72 million units by the time you add in the 2021 forecast values as well. Shipment growth is expected to accelerate over 2021 as a whole compared to 2020, more than 30%, 31.4% growth across 4G and 5G fixed wireless access CPEs. You can see from the chart that indoor CPEs represent more than 50% of the volume shipped. Looking at regional shipments of the 25 vendors in 2020, the Asia Pacific, excluding China and India, represented the largest portion in shipments, followed closely by the Middle East and Africa, and then Europe. Interestingly, device shipments in 2020 were predominantly focused on LTE or 4G capable devices. 95.5% of the total devices shipped were 4G only, and 4.5% of the total devices shipped were 4G and 5G capable. We would expect the proportion of 4G and 5G capable devices to grow in the future, I'm sure. The charts on this slide, show some of the survey findings on market trends, which I think are interesting. The 25 respondents were asked to consider the comparative importance of 5 different market trends and drivers in 2020 and 2021, rating 5 the most important and 1 the least important, and the combined ratings of their responses are shown here in the chart on the left. Home and homeschooling were identified as the strongest drivers of the global 4G, 5G fixed wireless access market in 2020, perhaps showing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in the market and people's requirement to be able to work and to school from home. While they're expected to remain most important trends in 2021 too, the launch of 5G comes a close second, and that's important. We see the number of 5G networks being launched around the world. We would expect that to translate into demand for 5G fixed wireless access and shipments in the future. At the same time, vendors were asked about their views on prospects for different form factors, and perhaps reflecting the fact that indoor deployment is the biggest part of the market, the results show a clear expectation that the market for self-installation solutions is going to grow. Okay, so that's the end of my statistical market overview. The research on which this presentation is based is available to GSA members and associates, and our research program continues with a variety of 5G and fixed wireless access related studies coming out soon, as this slide shows, including the update of the GSA Fixed Wireless Access Global Service Provider Survey, underway now and due to be published by the end of November, and it's GSA's intention to run an update of its 4G, 5G fixed wireless access CPE market survey in 2022. In the meantime, this is a fast-moving market, so if your company launches fixed wireless access service or devices, please tell us. Thank you for listening. To keep things on schedule, I'll now hand you over to Tim Miller at Plum Consulting, who's going to give us his presentation on market trends. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Simon. I hope people can hear me okay. I was going to give you a presentation on the growth of FWA in various markets, but unfortunately Simon has stolen my thunder somewhat on a number of the statistics that we had. So instead what I thought about was talking about the use of spectrum and the different spectrum bands that can be used by FWA and some of the issues that we are seeing around the world that people are focusing on and addressing. But the best way to start thinking about the future of FWA and the way that spectrum is used by FWA is to think about where it's come from. Now, in the UK and in Europe generally, we've been quite spoilt with good quality broadband. And FWA has always been seen as a second-rate option in the past, because it generally had slower speeds, was more expensive, greater latency, and so on. And a lot of that was due to the technology. And obviously, there have been a number of technologies that have been used. The most recent that is now being phased out was WiMAX, and WiMAX is actually still used in a number of countries around the world. This graph is interesting when you compare it to some of the ones that Simon put up before, showing you where 4G and 5G systems are used, because this shows you where the WiMAX systems are still used. The darker the magenta color, the more networks are in place. So there are 47 countries still using WiMAX, and it's important that we bear this in mind, because WiMAX is very often using spectrum that would otherwise be used by an LTE or 5G system. We are seeing that WiMAX networks are being turned off and being replaced with LTE and 5G, but the question is it being done quickly enough? Because LTE and 5G in particular has a number of advantages over WiMAX. And I'm actually going to move 2 slides on. because I've slightly changed the way I'm going to do the presentation. What I want to think about are the benefits of 5G FWA, and I'm really concentrating here on 5G because it is seen very much as the future of FWA. It removes pretty much all the downsides of WiMAX in terms of speed, number of connections, latency, and so on, which LTE goes some way to addressing, but not quite. 5G as an FWA platform has a number of big benefits. First of all, there is an established ecosystem, and it's growing. As Simon has just told you, there are many pieces of equipment that connect to the network and can be used to put the network together. Now, the benefit of having an established ecosystem, of course, is that your costs are reduced. You have large economies of scale, and costs are going to be falling over time. I'm not sure why the slides have just changed. There we go. Secondly, 5G, as I've been mentioning a couple of times, gives you some very high quality connections. They're high speeds and low latency. But the other big thing about 5G that it has an advantage over WiMAX in particular, but also over LTE, is its reliability. The connection is much more likely to stay stable, and that is particularly important if you're going to be trying to compare a FWA connection to something like fiber to the home or fiber to the premises. Another benefit is international harmonization. One of the issues that WiMAX had, particularly when it was being run in two different countries that shared a border, was that there were no set spectrum bands that are available for it. You know, it would often use 3500 megahertz, sometimes it used 2600, sometimes 2300. Sometimes it was running using different band plans within the same spectrum band, which led to interference at the borders. As I'll talk about in a moment, that is not an issue when it comes to 5G, because there has been an international harmonization drive for 5G spectrum bands. And another very large benefit of 5G FWA is that it can coexist with mobile networks. Now, this is particularly important when you think about spectrum use. There is a large amount of demand for spectrum, and bit by bit, we are finding crunches all over the place in the spectrum bands. If we're able to use the same spectrum as 5G uses, for example, then we're going to be able to make much better use of the spectrum. So it can coexist alongside 5G or LTE networks. There are some significant issues that remain that need some resolution. First of all, the fact that you've got some places which have actually used FDD in the 3500 megahertz band for their initial 5G FWA networks, and when you then look at mobile usage, then you want to have TDD, and they are fundamentally incompatible. Secondly, you've got to think about spectrum congestion. It's all very well saying that FWA can coexist with mobile, but if mobile wants to use all the spectrum that's available, then that's going to be mean there's nothing left for FWA. And then the other thing is about base station locations. One of the other benefits of running an FWA over 5G and coexisting with mobile is that you can theoretically use the same base stations to reach houses as you can mobiles. But the thing is that it may be that your demand is in different places, and so therefore you will lose some of the cost benefits from that. So let me just move back a slide and talk about the spectrum that we use for 5G. Now, importantly here, I'm talking about licensed spectrum, and I know that we've already had one question actually about whether there is an ecosystem of devices that can run on 6 gigahertz license exempt spectrum, and the answer is yes, there is. The problem is that as soon as you start to use license exempt or unlicensed spectrum, then you can end up with a lack of certainty over your network reliability and speed and so on. So if we want to think about making sure that you have kind of highly reliable networks that people will want to use instead of fiber to the premises, then you really want to start thinking about licensed spectrum. On the mobile side, then 5G is being run effectively over 3 different bands. There's the low band, the mid band, and the high band. Low band is at 700 megahertz, and that is especially within Europe and region 1. Within region 2, then actually 600 megahertz is more likely because they were already using 700 for LTE, so you then have to move things around a bit. But generally, you have a low band of UHF spectrum, sub 1 gigahertz UHF spectrum that is going to be used for mobile 5G. This is great for giving you a large coverage area, but it's not great for giving you 5G experience because you don't have the bandwidth available for that. The GSMA has calculated that you need to have at least 80 megahertz of spectrum, of contiguous spectrum, to be able to run a 5G experience service. And generally operators are finding that they're being awarded 20 megahertz at most in the 700 megahertz band, often in an FDV configuration, which means that they get it in terms of 2 by 10 megahertz. So you can get quite low speeds there, but there's a massive demand for this because it gives you the coverage. The C band, the mid band, is seen as effectively the main spectrum band that you want to use for 5G because it gives you a decent cell radius, a decent propagation. At the same time, you get a large bandwidth, which allows you to have high speeds and relatively low latency. It does mean that there is lower propagation than previous networks. Previous networks tended to run on 1800 or 2100 or sometimes 2600 megahertz spectrum, but this doesn't mean that you have to have base stations every 10 meters. Unlike the high band, the millimeter wave, 10 meters may be a bit of an over exaggeration, but it's not far off. You can get very, very high bandwidths here, giving you massive speeds, very low latency. But the problem is that the spectrum the radio signal does not travel very far at all, particularly when you're sending it to a mobile, which does not have a huge power output. As a result, when you look at mobile 5G, then there's not a lot of demand at the moment for millimeter wave. And many regulators are not awarding millimeter wave because they can't identify where the demand is coming from. So that's all about mobile. Let's have a quick look at what that means for FWA using 5G. With FWA, we don't want to use UHF. And the reason for that is that using UHF, although it means that you can have one base station that can cover a very large area, you end up with all the disadvantages of previous technologies in terms of low speed, poor latency, and so on. So we just don't want to use that. Plus the fact we already know from what I said before that the UHF band is going to be completely congested by mobile operators. Instead, FWA on 5G is tending to use two sets of bands. There's the C band and then there's the millimeter wave bands. Now the C band, as I said before, there's a really good ecosystem there. There's a large growth in this area, and certainly in rural areas which can require signals that go a long way. It can be a good way of rolling out a 5G FWA system, and we've seen quite a few of them. In fact, if you look at Richard's slide on the 5G FWA, then a lot of those networks that are already in place are using the C band. The only problem with this is that there's already a high demand for this band for mobile networks. And as a result, as you end up with more and more traffic being carried over mobile, then there's going to be an increasing capacity crunch for FWA networks. Now, this can be mitigated in some way with the coexistence, but it doesn't change the fact that there's only a limited amount of spectrum to use. On the other hand, you've got the millimeter wave. And the millimeter wave band, as I said before, cannot go very far, but it does have the advantage of very, very high bandwidth, which leads to very high network speeds, and it can have low latency. The disadvantage when it came to mobile is that it can't go very far because you have a low power. And the reason you have a low power is because you don't want to be holding a mobile phone that is heated to 200 degrees centigrade. That is not an issue when it comes to FWA, of course, because your base station and your customer equipment can both receive and transmit with much higher power, depending on the constraints from kind of your local regulator. So the low cell radius can be mitigated to some extent using increased power. So actually, millimeter wave is actually very well suited for FWA over 5G. And we're starting to see that there are some rollout examples of this already. Verizon in the US and TIM in Italy have already got established networks in place. And there's been some very good results coming from recent tests from Italy, showing that you can have a 1 gigabit a second service that covers 6.5 kilometers range. That's actually a pretty large cell site. If you reduce it down to 1 kilometer range, which actually quite a lot of networks do run at, then you can actually get 4 gigabits a second, which is much higher than many fiber networks are offering. The key constraint on actually FWA being run over 5G millimeter wave everywhere is that many regulators are not awarding this spectrum. They do not know where the demand is coming from, and as a result, they are very keen to kind of hold it back a bit. We have carried out a couple of studies recently, one for Qualcomm, one for ARCEP in France, looking at use and demand of the 26 gigahertz spectrum. And in both cases, we're looking at use cases for industry, use cases from mobile operators, and so on. Nobody's really thinking about whether this should actually be seen as an FWA finally band. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's something that is very well suited to FWA, and FWA networks should be going to their local regulators and trying to push for, first of all, a decrease in power limitations so that they can make sure they have a decent cell size. And secondly, making sure that this spectrum is awarded quickly and efficiently. And of course, the thing is that where regulators are awarding 5G spectrum only to mobile network operators, that may not be a good thing for the FWA industry if there are FWA operators who aren't actually mobile operators. So we have to be quite careful about pushing who should be able to buy this spectrum. And that's basically what I wanted to say. I think the spectrum use is an interesting point that we should be focusing on. So I thank you very much, and I will pass you, I think, back to Joe to introduce the next session.
Thank you, Tim. Excellent presentation. Thank you for that. Let me just remind everybody that if you want to ask questions, you can do that through the questions part on the which is normally the right-hand side of the screen. So please do that. And we've now got the next session, which we're looking at what's happening in more to the west of the world, if you like, the US and parts of Europe. So we've got two excellent speakers from operators from US Cellular and Imagine. But first, we've got Brian Paisley from US Cellular, who's going to explain to us some of the things that they're doing around fixed wireless access. Brian, he's over to you.
Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Let me take control of the slides here. We don't need to dwell on my title slide. I wanted to kick off by talking a little bit about who US Cellular is. So we are another US, so it was interesting to watch the last presentation because I'm going to dovetail some of that, and I'm going to say some subtly different things about some of the topics discussed. We are a carrier in the US. We are the last of the super regional carriers in the US. Which means that we offer service everywhere in the country, but that we are actually an MNO only in those dark colored areas. Hey, there we go. We have approximately 5 million customers and operate across 21 states. And we've been around for 38 years, 14 of which I have been an associate here at US Cellular. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my background because I know a lot of the conversation here is skewed a little bit more technical. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that my background is in strategy and financial forecasting and pricing and product management. So I'm predominantly today, my job at US Cellular is figuring out what the strategy for our home internet product is and how we're going to convince people to buy it from us. So a lot of my focus is going to be on just kind of the overarching business strategy and how we're going to sell it. So every conversation that I have with people about the products that we sell at US Cellular starts off by talking about the fact that we have two fundamentally different products that are delivered by very different technologies and have totally different strategies in terms of what we're trying to do. So while we said that we don't want to use low frequency for fixed wireless, US Cellular does definitely use low frequency for fixed wireless. So we have spectrum ranging from 600 to 850 megahertz. It's mostly 4G, but we do have 5G available in some areas. And what the product that we sell there is going to be delivered to internal units. Our primary customer base is going to be customers who live in fairly rural areas who don't have good alternatives for home internet access. And the strategy there is one of asset utilization, right? So we run a mobility network, and because we run a mobility network, we have spectrum and network assets everywhere. So that includes some pretty rural places in Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, etc. And in order to continue to drive ROI on those assets, it's my job to fill that pipe with data and with paying customers. And so when we look at low band, and that's the primary product that I would say is going to be, meeting the mission of bridging the digital divide, would be this low band product. It's the one that's going to work a lot of places. As we discussed earlier, it's not going to drive incredible speeds. I think we see usage on average around 8 megabits per second, but it can be vary anywhere, up to 50 megabits per second, and down to 3, depending on network busyness. But that's a good product for a certain set of customers. What we're getting ready to embark in, and in fact, just last week, we began commercially selling our Home Internet Plus product. And what our Home Internet Plus product is, it's utilizing that millimeter wave spectrum. So US Cellular in particular has 24, 28, and 39 gigahertz. That's all going to be 5G. Our CPE there is a high-powered CPE that's it's an Inseego device. I feel like I should talk about network. Our network assets are Ericsson and Nokia network equipment. CPE is Inseego, and we have a professionally mounted device. So we have installers come to customers' houses, and we mount it on the roof. And it's predominantly line of sight. So if you can see, it's tiny and blurry up in the top right corner, but Tim is absolutely right. The coverage is not what we're used to seeing when we're talking about 600 megahertz, which that map would be entirely green if we were utilizing 600 megahertz. But when we're talking about millimeter wave, it's pretty tight. You can see that we're talking about blocks there. And how many houses we can cover in a certain number of blocks. This product is probably not going to be one that's particularly effective in terms of bridging the digital divide because of the problems with like trees are everywhere, particularly where people live. It's funny. A lot of times I'll see a map that has a lot of green on it, but that green will be like a park or an industrial park or something like that isn't really where most of my revenue is going to sit. As soon as we get to residential, we got a lot of trees. And so we have some challenges to face there. The strategy here with millimeter wave is it's new assets and new revenue streams. And so it's a very different model. We're figuring out where to build the business and where we can build the business and where we can compete effectively. And I would tell you that largely we're going to face competition where we're going. So we probably are going to have to build it in areas where cable is a monopoly. That's probably our primary focus. And so we're going to look to steal some share in those places. So I was asked to talk about best practices, which I laughed at a little bit when I was asked to do it, because I feel like I have a lot of working hypotheses, but I don't necessarily have a lot of best practices. It's probably easier to talk about the kinds of challenges we face because I think it's really interesting. Here I've kind of categorized it into 3 different categories. I would say there are several technology challenges we face, as I said, to a large extent in terms of millimeter wave. we're going to look to compete against cable. And that's really interesting because the product that we're bringing to the marketplace isn't necessarily a product that performs better. I think the industry has a good understanding of what it looks like when an overbuilder is a fiber overbuilder, and they have a potentially cost advantage slash performance advantage product. I think it's going to be interesting as we go to the marketplace and we don't necessarily have a product that's going to have higher KPIs for customers. It's also going to be interesting to get them to explore a product that where they have established expectations with regard to product performance. They're going to expect it to have light switch reliability. They're going to expect to have conferences like this that they'd have uninterrupted service. So thinking about how we're going to sell products to those customers, it is a real challenge. So the marketplace is also fascinating here in the U.S. For anybody who's based in the U.S., you know that there's a lot of conversation about the government investing in broadband and working to help subsidize bridging the digital divide. And that's creating an interesting environment in our marketplace where we're going to see a lot of edging out of fiber providers. We're going to see some new entrants with some creative other solutions. I think we have some WISPs. And certainly every wireless provider is thinking about how to get into the marketplace. And so I think participants are going to grow. Beyond that, we have, Elon Musk launching low orbit satellites and whatever they might be doing there. And so it's just an interesting dynamic marketplace, and anything that you think you understand based on what the landscape looks like today is an evolving and moving target. Then the final challenge is one that I have internally, and anybody who works at an established company doing something that isn't the thing that their company primarily does. As I said on a prior slide, Us Cellular has been selling wireless for 38 years. And while we have sold home internet over low band, it's a fundamentally different proposition. And so getting engineers and marketers and business owners and everybody to prioritize getting this product off the ground and kind of using a different marketplace intuition to attack the marketplace is a real challenge and is an everyday challenge that I face. And so I think that's a really interesting problem that I sort of understood when I took this job, but didn't fully understand. All right, I think that's the material I had intended to cover. I'm happy to address any questions if anybody has.
Thank you, Brian. So very interesting. Thinking about how you've got an internal issue as well as an external issue. How do you manage that situation internally, where you've got obviously management who've got a 30-odd year strategy that's in the past and going forward? How do you balance the two things?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of times when in terms of incentivizing the executive team, it's like it's as you discuss many topics with them, you just need to remind them, right? Like they're busy and they're doing a lot of other things, and their primary focus is often other places, and so you just got to repeat yourself a lot. So I find myself covering the same ground and reminding them of conversations that we've had. Beyond that, I would say in terms of motivating the organization, I think it's been very useful for us that we have a robust strategic planning process. And so those long-range plans that show the value, the long-term growth of the product and show where we think this thing can go and will go is really valuable, because it's one thing to talk about the number of subscribers I'm going to deliver next year or the revenue I'm going to deliver next year, but 5 year, it gets a lot more motivational when you start talking about the 5-year plan and where we're going to get in 5 years.
Okay, there's just one quick question that came in regarding data caps for the fixed wireless access. Do you have to do that, especially at the low band? Do you have to do data caps and throttle speeds for those using the low band spectrum?
Yeah, so in the low band, what we do is we sell various data plans in various places. So if we have engineering run a model to say where we have excess capacity and where we do not have excess capacity. And in the locations where we have excess capacity, we offer an unlimited plan, which we don't offer in the remaining markets. In the markets where we don't have excess capacity, we price in a way where if we happen to drive capacity, we feel like we have it covered and that we can do that at a margin. In the places where we do have excess capacity, we price it without kind of that overhead of buying assets built into the pricing, but then we just have to watch it. I will say that plan, like almost any plan in the home internet industry, does have kind of a backstop. And so we actually do, even though it's referred to as unlimited, we do throttle customers that we flag as heavy data users, and that happens at 200 gigabytes. Does that kind of, so we do not rate limit any of the home internet plans. So we don't utilize video optimization or what we call MBRs or max bit rate.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Very interesting. So we'll need to move on.
Yep.
So we've got a lot to cover. So thank you for that, Brian. We now move to Imagine and Sean Bulger. So Sean, over to you. You can just use the arrow button to move the slides. So if I just move you across initially, there you go.
Thank you very much for having me on the call, and congratulations on the achievement so far. I suppose the question is best practice FWA. I'm the CEO of Imagine. We've got a particular approach to the market, so hopefully we'll move through this very quickly, and then I'm happy to take questions. So really one of the challenges is for me is basically what is the definition of FWA? And this is a particular issue which is causing difficulty in the market, but in terms of consumers. As you've got legacy unlicensed, you've got millimeter wave, you've got hybrid, and you've got a dedicated. And these are all different business models. So I suppose understanding this from an operator's point of view, vendors, regulators, and market development is a major challenge. And how regulators look at the market. Some of the speakers so far have been talking about regulation for access to millimeter wave. And this is a challenge that we faced in identifying and regulators understanding the market opportunity. And this is especially in a case when, it's a new product, it's a new service. So we've been active in the market since 2010 on wireless, but in 2016 we launched the service. So we've gone through the regulatory process and the spectrum award process. I suppose for us, the key future is 5G, 4G, and 5G, and that's where you have a particular challenge, which is the difference between the hybrid model, which is the mobile operator using spare capacity, and in our case, the dedicated fixed wireless access, which are entirely different businesses and entirely different economics and business models and opportunity. So distinguishing between them, particularly in terms of regulation and the market, is a challenge. Where we come into the equation is we basically have taken a position which is 4G as a last mile alternative to fiber to the home. So we set out to take that opportunity in terms of how we designed the network. So it's taking advantage of the cost and time to market, the slow pace of rollout of fiber, and that's specifically in markets in Western Europe where you have the slow pace of fiber deployment. Locking down that market and taking that opportunity, to us, the key marker is the 150 broadband. So that's once you can get somebody connected on 150 meg broadband, then you have them going forward. So it's the shift in the market from legacy broadband to next generation high-speed broadband is our key strategy in the market. And then an industry roadmap, which takes you then into the higher speeds later on down the road, makes it investable from an infrastructure point of view. So that's the overall approach. So who we are, basically very quickly, and as I'll talk about this, we're really a strategic investor and operator challenger in fixed and mobile for over 30 years. So what we do is we really identify and develop opportunities, strategic shifts in the market. So we like to take big challenges, big opportunities. We were the first competitor in the Irish market. We were actually one of the first competitors across Europe as the first national telecoms competitors in 1997. And we actually launched the very first commercial MVNO ever. in 1999. So, we're proud to be, let's say, at the cutting edge. Sometimes it's the bleeding edge. Sometimes we have had considerable financial success, and other times we've made considerable losses. So we like the risk, we like the opportunity. For us, we've spent 10 years now getting the experience in best practice, and that's what this talk is about. So what's the best practice in terms of design, development and optimization of 4G, 5G as future-proof last mile alternative to fiber? So what our objective financially in the market is to secure 20% market share in the shift to next generation high-speed broadband. And that's by being first with 150 meg broadband. And our target market is the 1.6 million premises in rural areas, suburban, regional and rural areas. So the areas outside of urban areas. We commenced the actual launch. We did the initial trial in 2016. We won spectrum in the mid-band 60 megahertz spectrum in 2017. So we're one of the first non-mobile operators to specifically acquire spectrum for the 4G and 5G fixed broadband opportunity. And that was a kind of a difficult sell to investors, but thankfully we got a lot of support and we were successful in securing the 60 megahertz of spectrum. What we've achieved so far is we've competed effectively with fiber to home all the way through COVID. We've secured 25% of the market shifts in the target market. So this is real. COVID was a challenge and an opportunity, and what stood out was that the technology performed. How did it perform? Well, we basically matched fiber and cable in terms of average usage at over 450 gigabits per month. And how do we do it? It's achieved through best practice. So we have a particular design approach to and deployment approach to how to optimize 4G and 5G for fixed wireless. And we're already on the roadmap, progression to full 5G, which will see us then going to 500 megs and 1 gigs. So what do we do? Best practice is basically in designing the alternative to fiber in terms of last mile. Obviously, fiber is a critical part of our network. So all of our network is backhauled through fiber. And what we're really talking about is not an alternative to fiber, but the last mile. So Imagine provides a very reliable fixed broadband service to rural homes and businesses, and critically at the performance levels that people demand and expect. That's totally different to what is being sold, but what they actually use and what they actually demand. So on that basis, we've effectively competed well with fiber. We've taken the market share, and we've done that by satisfying customer demand, which is a key issue. It's a fully dedicated fixed wireless network. We use the licensed mid-band spectrum. That's 60 megahertz of 3.6 gigahertz. And Ireland was one of the first countries to award that spectrum in 2017. And optimize. The network is completely optimized for one purpose, which is to provide a high quality home broadband and business broadband experience. Critically, we can achieve service levels that you cannot achieve with mobile broadband, unlicensed via FWA or other hybrid fixed mobile solutions. In the Irish market, for example, the mobile broadband usage equivalent during COVID was about 10 gigabits per month. So the best practice design into the interesting piece of this. So basically it's mid-band 3.6 gigahertz. As Tim was saying earlier on, it's all about the balance of capacity and coverage. So 3.6 is the optimum spectrum, we believe, from a commercial, economic, financial perspective, in that it gives you the right balance between capacity and coverage. Within that, we basically have only outdoor CPE. So we do not have any indoor CPE, or any mobile devices or anything else. We basically have a selection of CPE, including high performance antenna CPE. That ensures a really solid quality of service and the coverage and capacity advantage over mobile. Completely uncontested microwave and fiber backhaul, a very high capacity core optimized for fixed. So the whole core over the period of 6 years was designed and optimized for fixed services. So a huge part of the functionality of the core in terms of mobility is switched off, and We configured it specifically after lots of testing so that we get the very best performance, both on the core and the RAN. We have specifically designed, we have off-the-shelf RAN solutions. We work closely with a number of vendors to optimize the RAN. We've been at the forefront of the design of a number of particular configurations, including with Huawei, and we're credited by Huawei with being a key contributor to their WTTX solution. And we have a test lab which we've used with multiple vendors to basically optimize their RAN configurations. I suppose where we've gotten to on that is a particular configuration and an antenna design through collaboration with industry, which is a 6-sector hard split, which effectively massively reduces interference between sectors and gives the maximum optimized coverage and capacity. Critical to our deployment is we basically have designed the network for outdoor fixed CP only, professionally installed, and we will not connect customers that do not meet that minimum requirement. So we are targeted at one outcome and one outcome only, which is to get people connected at a very high speed broadband service and to keep those customers. So we're not investing money in getting people broadband for the sake of it, or 30 meg broadband. If they don't meet the metrics, then we don't connect them. So this is a key strategic decision which impacts every aspect of the network and the commercial outcome. So we basically have a capability which is up to 20 kilometers. It's actually above. We have limitations set around the network based on location, etc., and our mapping process. But effectively, the overall design of the network effectively allows us to cover a wide area and then reduce the coverage with demands and densification. So a large part of our network has been full. So we then basically densify the network based on demand. So it's an attractive financial model and approach. What does this mean in practice deployment? Well, it's pre-qualification. So we have a very detailed mapping process, mapping database, and we have a GIS process. So we have very detailed pre-qualification based on accurate maps. Our sales maps are very accurate, which means that we reduce failures and install issues. Professionally installed outdoor CP, all our network is now category 12. We've upgraded category 4 and category 6 to category 12. And we have a very strict enforcement of the RF performance metrics at install. And that's basically based on our own tools that we've designed internally. And we basically have very close coordination with our tech and support and RF planning during the installation process. So installers cannot, and I reiterate, cannot connect the customer. They cannot bypass the system. So we guarantee that at install, the customer is getting the best possible signal, which we then use to manage and maintain the network. Performance, service, and capacity optimization means we get an average CINO of 22 dB. Average modulation levels, we have 62% 256 QAM, total 98% 64 QAM, which is the difference, 36%, and 99% 2x2 MIMO, which we consider to be at the top of the performance of any LTE network in the world. We've been advised. Best practice operations, proprietary manage and develop tools. So we have a whole suite of tools specifically designed for fixed wireless access in terms of the design, installation, monitoring, and management. We have a continuous monitoring of end-to-end metrics and performance. So we log exactly what the performance metrics were when this customer was installed. And we, on a continuous basis, monitor that to see that that's been maintained and look for any variations. So we look at the CP performance and the RF performance. Proactive data reports and review of exceptions by site, CP performance outside planned thresholds, and very clearly defined actions arising from that. We also then implement grooming as we densify the network and cell locking, which gives a significant benefit, and over-the-top CP management to optimize performance with the densification. So as we grow the network and densify it, there's a management process for it to upgrade and optimize the network. Evolution path for us, we're currently operating off LTE 60 megahertz spectrum acquired in 2016. Achieved services, yes, you can get 300 meg. In real life, we get 200 plus, purely because of the design of the network. We do connect customers at a minimum of 100 as we're rolling out the network in the early stages. So we market the service at 150, which is what our target is. We see that going through current testing and tests that we're doing in trials of up to 500 to 600 with the 5G non-standalone. And we're looking at additional spectrum on the 5G standalone, and then future 23 to 25, seeing that going further. What relevance or difference that has in terms of actual customer usage and take-up is yet to be seen. Because basically, in our view, that goes way beyond what any customer would actually need. But we will have the capability to do it if required. So, key questions, the FWA ecosystem, key message to the vendors. Obviously, given the audience, I think one thing to look at is clearly better support required for the LTE anchor mid-band spectrum to support 5G NSA. Great support in the RAN and CP for multi-band operation across the mid-band. That could certainly deal with some acceleration and progress, and certainly will lead to some significant opportunities on the CP side, because that affects the evolution and transition of the network from the legacy LTE to 5G. Early support for future additional spectrum. We expect additional spectrum to be reaching 4.8 and 6 gigahertz. So that's something to watch. And we expect that the Open RAN should increase choice and support for FWA, but it has to be at the right cost, where you do find that a lot of the solutions are mobile-centric, and pricing tends to be mobile-centric. So that's been something we've had to challenge both on the core and the RAN side. So that's something to consider of how you would structure your pricing and approach to a FWA rather than a mobile scenario or purchaser. Regulatory barriers. Dedicated 4G, 5G fixed wireless is a completely different market. For mobile operators that we work with who have looked at getting into fixed wireless, they have been shocked at the fundamental difference between those businesses, both in terms of the customer, the relationship, the usage, and basic customer service support, installation, etc. So it's not an easy space for operators. One issue that we do see as a blocker in terms of the achievement in the market, and obviously very positive development with the FWA group, but one issue is the reporting of FWA together, which includes all legacy FWA and WISPs and every other provider, does hide the impact in the market. So our regulator reports all of FWA together, and it hides the impact of our usage. And while we have taken a significant share of the market, it effectively impacts the competition in that people can't actually identify it from the data provided. So that's something to consider from a regulatory point of view. We also think the spectrum was suitable for FWA, often included in multi-band auctions. We had to compete in an auction with major players like Three and Vodafone to acquire and secure that spectrum, and that was a challenge. And something that regulators certainly should consider. We think that markets where operators or regulators have kept spectrum for FWA will see more rapid development, both in terms of as an alternative to fiber, but also from a private network perspective. Also need to safeguard and release further mid-band ranges, as I've said earlier on. So the sooner the better. And we'd like to see a bit more progress on the assignment of millimeter wave spectrum, not currently in use. That's it. Thank you very much. And hopefully there's some valuable information on insights from an operator perspective. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Sean. That's excellent. Some really good information there. So thank you for that. You can download the slides that have been shown So please do that, and then we will share them afterwards as well. I've got one question then regarding millimetric wave. What would you ID band would you like to see made available that you can utilize fixed wireless access for in Ireland?
Well, I think it's just part of the equation. Our major market is on the C-band, and that's where we see it. But in certain scenarios, the millimeter wave technology, especially the increased coverage at this point in time, is looking attractive. So 26, 28, and 32 are basically what we would be looking at in Ireland from our perspective. But as the guys from Plum were saying, from a regulatory point of view, the regulators don't see where the demand is coming from. So I think there needs to be quite a bit of work there in basically making the case from a regulatory point of view.
Then just quickly, you say that unless people are meeting your strict requirements, you don't connect them.
Yeah.
What about, and you're just using outdoor CPE, are you not considering any sort of indoor CPE if it's very close to the base station, so you get better SNR?
No. I mean, we have considerable experience with indoor CPE. We bought the two largest wireless operators in Ireland, both who had deployed legacy technologies and then WiMAX. We did deploy indoor CPE, and the variability and the overall impact on the network is quite considerable. And what people do with CPs is shocking, where they put them and what they do with them. So you can put it in there, but getting it in the optimum position so that it doesn't impact the overall network. It's a sacrifice that we're willing to make. We can't get the quality of service otherwise. So. Okay,
good to know that you stick to that criteria. So thank you both again to Sean and Brian for this session. So. We're now moving on to session 3. So I'm going to hand over to Jose Ayer. Jose is chair of the GSA SUBTEL Spectrum Group, and so he now has a panel of people from Latin America, from the regulatory side, and also the chairperson from the SUBTEL Group. So please. Carry on.
Thank you very much, Joe. My name is Jose Ayala. As Joe mentioned, I'm in charge of the Spectrum Group at GSA in the Sutel region. Today, we have an outstanding panel here with the regulators from Latin America. And we are going to share a dialogue on the different perspectives, how policies can stimulate the use of fixed wireless access in rural areas. As we all know, the recent COVID pandemic has reassured the crucial importance of broadband connectivity for society. The lockdowns have forced our homes to turn quickly into office, school, entertainment, and living spaces. As a result of this, broadband adoption accelerated during the past year. Yet, there are still large sectors of the population without reliable and meaningful digital connectivity, mainly in rural areas. The latest data from the ITU UNESCO Broadband Commission confirms there is a considerable amount of population lacking internet connectivity. Worldwide, this is about 49% of the population, but this is even more critical in developing and least developed countries, where this percentage goes up to 80% of internet access. People without internet access. The governments and industries clearly need to work together to increase the availability and adoption of affordable, ubiquitous, and reliable broadband services. Here, 4G and 5G FWA technologies are proven and scalable network technologies with advanced functionalities, such as ultra-low latency, high capacity, and ultra-reliable connectivity, which makes them superior to most technologies used in rural programs today. When compared specifically to fiber optic deployments in rural areas, fixed wireless access has 3 unique advantages. The first one is the time to market. Fiber rollout is very time consuming. A lot of digging, installation, permit processes, and so on. While FWA is a very light technology. Financial advantage is another area. Fiber build-out is capital intensive with very low return on investment outside dense urban areas, where fixed wireless access has light investment profile with lower risk. Then the last advantage is the reuse of existing mobile infrastructure in most cases makes fixed wireless access more affordable and expedite than the fiber build-out, which is very resource intensive. Now, closing the digital divide is not a technology issue. There's no single technology that can reach all population in all the rural scenarios. It is essentially a policy issue. So traditionally, governments have provided incentive for expanded mobile services to rural areas by using different mechanisms such as funding rural programs, beauty contests with coverage obligations, universal access funds, discounts on spectrum auction fees or license renewals in exchange of infrastructure investments. Although these programs are quite successful, they do not address the modern broadband connectivity needs in rural homes. And with the latest fixed wireless access technologies available today, governments may look into considering models to expand wireless broadband services into rural homes directly. Here we share an example from Norway, where there is still a broadband gap despite the large fiber optic build-out in the country. In its latest spectrum auction, the Norwegian Communication Authority, NCOM, introduced a specific discount incentive for expanding FWA into rural homes directly. Operators with existing sites, they receive lower discounts, while operators with no infrastructure receive higher discounts. In the end, this model is a win-to-win situation for everyone involved, the government, the operators, and especially the rural consumers. Second here. In our panel today, we have distinguished authorities from the Americas region, starting from Mr. Oscar Leon, who is the Executive Secretary of Sutel and has a long experience in the telecom sector. And then we will go into he will provide a keynote, and then we will go into a panel of regulators from the Latin American region in which they will share their views and experiences. We will follow with some questions from the moderator, and then if there is time at the end, we will go into questions from the audience. Well, I welcome here Mr. Leon. He's, as I mentioned, he's the Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission, called Sutel, part of the American States Organization. He formerly served as General Director of the Colombian National Spectrum Agency. Also, formerly, he was the regulatory manager for operator Claro in Colombia, and he's been advisor to multiple ICT ministries and authorities in the Americas region. He holds an electronic engineering degree with a postgraduate degree in telecommunications, project management, and a master's degree in business administration. So here, I welcome our friend and distinguished colleague, Mr. Leon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend Jose. Greetings for everyone. Can you hear me well? Sorry. I so that maybe there is some noise at the background. Can you confirm, please? Okay. Now I can listen very well. I said that thank you. Somebody has noise in the background.
Jose, could you mute your audio, please?
Okay, thank you. Greetings for everyone. My name is Oscar Leon, Executive Secretary of SUTEL, the Inter-American Telecommunication Commission. This is an organism of the Organization of American States. And before I start, I would like to thank GSA for having me at this forum. As some of you mentioned, it has been clear that the digital connectivity has advanced quite fast in the last years to expand the access and the adoption of broadband infrastructure and services. For instance, between June 2019 and June 2020, the websites linked to e-commerce have increased by more than 400%. And the digital platforms have a growth of 1,500% in the last 10 years. Nevertheless, it was also highlighted that these are still main challenges to face with digital disparities. We have around 45% of the population outside of digital work. 7 of these live on areas without any kind of connectivity, and 38% of the population don't use the internet. So closing digital divide is a key priority for most governments. It supports a wide range of strategies, for example, to reduce the impact in children education based on an end 2020 policies report presented by United Nations. The learning disruptions have affected 94% of the global student population. This corresponds to almost 1.6 billion students in over 190 countries, and the biggest disruption to education systems in history. And to close this digital divide, SUTEL work along with the countries in the Americas, the private sector, and all the interested parts to exchange experience that promote inclusive connectivity in the region and develop a compilation of the better practices to reduce the digital divide. And as conclusion of those better practices, we have also some recommendations. I will talk about the recommendations later. But in this compilation of better practices, we also include some of the main barriers reflected in the continent, in Latin America and the Caribbean. One of those are the obsolete political and regulatory frameworks. Some of the countries, they have some laws that are from 20 years ago. This is the time when we have a fixed telephony and not internet massive as we have now. The second is the lack of long-term spectrum management. The third one is the cities with restrictions on connectivity without connectivity incentives for deployment of infrastructure. And the four important, some of the main, are the inequity and lack of digital skills. And as a result of the roundtables that we had, it was about 8 roundtables, a discussion of multiple stakeholders. There are 21 relevant initiatives that were released in the adoption of policies and regulations aimed to implement concrete actions to speed up the digital transformation, especially in rural and underserved areas. The Organization of American States Permanent Council ratified these recommendations. It was last week, and it will be submitted to the General Assembly and become Organization of American States recommendations. It is with this way, the 34 American countries and industry will have a legal support to adjust their policies, regulation, and projects. I summarize some of them here, not all of them, but one is promote the use of universal service funds or assistance funds for connectivity projects aimed at the remote or underserved areas. Or there is the encourage and support the implementation of business models to motivate the entry of new economic agents and promote their financial sustainability. Also encourage public and private investment, as well as public-private entrepreneurships, alliances, and resource sharing. Also, promote cooperation and dismantle barriers to infrastructure deployment between the central and local governments. It is trying to resolve permitting and right-of-way issues. Periodically review to the applicable regulations to provide fast response to specific connectivity demands and needs. Creating a regulatory environment to encourage innovation and investment for technical development. We have also, the other one is implement flexible regulatory frameworks that facilitate the access to service and the use of the radio spectrum. This to encourage investment in those areas and promote compliances with service coverage obligation. It is reducing not the pay, it is more try to have more coverage obligations, as Jose explained in Norway and other countries. Also consider alternative and innovative models of assignments, permissions, and payment for the use of electric spectrum. And thank you so much, and I am available to support you, or Sutel available to support your initiatives in the 34 countries of the Americas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for your excellent keynote. And here we enter into the panel session. Our first panelist is from the Chilean regulator, Mr. Manuel Gonzalez. He is the head of the Radioelectric Spectrum and Numbering Unit at the Subsecretariat of Telecommunications, called SUBTEL. He has over 20 years of experience in the regulatory sector, especially spectrum management, and holds a civil electrical engineering degree from the University of Chile with specializations in telecommunications networks and IoT and Industry 4.0 from other local universities. So welcome aboard, Manuel. Now you have to turn your camera and a microphone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jose. Hello, everybody. I'm head of Spectrum Department in Chile. I'd like to start with the status market in Chile. As for statistics, we consider as fixed wireless access connection that use 3.5 gigahertz and Wi-Fi. In the case of Wi-Fi, only includes connection with contract or stable service, leaving out those without temporary access, like library, airport. As we can see in the graph, the penetration is 4% of fixed wireless access. The penetration expand in 2019. Since then, the penetration keep constant. The majority of this connection is on 3.5 gigahertz. In terms of the regulatory view, we have we assigned in 2002 to fixed telephone bands 3.5. In Chile, the license are valid for 30 years. We use as well typical Wi-Fi bands for fixed wireless access. And both service and every service are regulated for General Telecommunication Law and Guarantee Minimum Speed Law. The last law is not yet in operation, but in the few months probably will be active. This year there was 4 contests in 4 bands: 700 extended AWGS, 3.5 and millimeter bands in dense urban areas. According to our law, Chile applies the so-called beauty contest for assigning frequency. Best technical projects are chosen, considering coverage and speed of implementation. When there is a tie on technical score, it is resolved by means on one round auction. We have a telecommunication development funds as well, FDT, provides subsidy to telecom providers based on contest, focus on reduce digital divide, using any different of technology, Wi-Fi, mobile coverage, fiber optics, and so on. FDT has support fiber optics network for most southern in the most south of Chile. As well, FDT has contributed to facilitate a study for submarine cables system connection to Asia to South America. The name was Humboldt Cable. Spectrum band could be used typical Wi-Fi. In the future, millimeter bands will be operative. Currently, CPE fixed equipment can be used in mobile bands, 700, 800, 5G, 900, AWGS, 1.9 GHz, 2.6 GHz, and 3.5 GHz. 5 technology will be a great support for competitive wireless broadband. The much of the penetration of 4G is 90% of the population has 4G in Chile. That was my short presentation. Sorry for my poor English. Okay.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Moving on, we have our next panelist, Mr. Glenn Fallas, who is the General Quality Director at the Costa Rican regulator Sutel. Mr. Fallas has over 16 years of experience in telecom regulations, including quality of service, spectrum management, and in user rights protection. He has solid experience in spectrum planning, monitoring, bidding process, and spectrum auctions, and holds an electronic degree with a specialization on telematics and telecommunications from Costa Rican University. Welcome, Glenn. You must turn your camera on, and you have it, and so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jose, and thank the GSA organization for having Costa Rica here in this panel. And well, I'm going to present very briefly the current situation of Costa Rica regarding the fixed wireless access. First of all, these are the current spectrum assignments in Costa Rica. We have to take into account that for example, the state-owned company called Grupo ICE, they have this spectrum assigned regarding the legacy WiMAX network that they are currently not using, and we are facing this challenge currently to free some C-band spectrum. And the Claro and Movistar has recently been acquired by Liberty, but they both has around 100 megahertz of spectrum allocated. With the spectrum above 6 gigahertz, we have a good opportunity here because most of the spectrum is currently available. This is thanks to the recently National Frequency Allocation update that established the channelization and the IMT allocation for those bands. At the beginning of this year, we run a public consultation considering the 700 megahertz band, the 2.3 gigahertz band, the lower part of the C band, and the millimeter wave and 26 and 28 gigahertz band. And we have a lot of responses, but we have to point out that regarding fixed wireless access, we have two cable companies that were very interested in having access to the millimeter wave spectrum to deploy fixed wireless services. Considering the current market of fixed internet access, most of the services are deployed by Cooper networks or fiber networks, and we have a very new market on the fixed wireless access area, and around 6,000 users, and the current operators that are delivering that services are Movistar and Claro, and they offer different kind of spectrum of services considering the capacity caps and different prices. About about fixed wireless access licensing, we have to take into account that in Costa Rica we have a by law principle that is technology neutrality. So when we issue a license, the operator is free to select the best technology to deliver, but this is also flexible in terms of the services that they can deploy. For example, if an operator wants to deploy a fixed service and mobile services, they only notify that to the regulator, and they will be able to deploy these new services. We have to take into account that also during the auction process, Sutel established some technical characteristics to enable for the new deployments to select the possible new technologies available. And we hope that with the millimeter wave spectrum, the fixed wireless access could be delivering more services in our country and helping to close the digital divide. Well, with the 26 gigahertz and 28 gigahertz, we have a very big opportunity, we think, in Costa Rica, because we have more than 5 gigahertz of a spectrum available for a new contest. And considering the information posted by Ericsson that established that the price of deploying a fixed wireless access service to per household will be much lower than other technologies, we think that fixed wireless access could be an opportunity to deploy new types of services and to close the digital divide. We're also, Sutel is finishing a consultancy study about fixed wireless access to try to establish technical specifications of these services regarding a possible new spectrum auction process. And we have to take into account also that we are planning to use to enable fixed wireless access for the millimeter wave and also for the mid bands for IMT services, planning to use on 5G services. Just to point out that the services that were deployed by Movistar and Claro were based on LTE networks. So just to clarify that. And well, this is the current situation of Costa Rica, and we are open to address any question that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Now, moving back to our friend, longtime friend and colleague, Mr. Miguel Felipe Anzola from Colombia. He is the General Director of the Colombian National Spectrum Agency, ANE, since 2018. He has a long professional career in the public sector at Colombian Ministry of ICT and CRC regulatory agency. He has solid experience on spectrum management, funding of ICT programs, and also has worked in the operator side with the operator FTV. He holds a physics and electric engineering degree and a master's degree in electrical engineering from the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and a master's degree in economic sciences from the National University of Colombia. Welcome on board, Miguel Felipe, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, José Luis, and thank you to GSA for the invitation to this panel. Okay, Regarding the deployment of 5G networks, the ICT Ministry has issued a 5G plan. So I want to show you the regulatory practices that are implemented in Colombia to boost the universal broadband service adoption. The 5G plan establishes the roadmap for the adoption of this new technology in Colombia. Within this plan, the regulatory framework was developed allowing the assignment of spectrum for testing, with the aim that operators could familiarize themselves with this technology and adequately plan the deployment of their networks. Additionally, the ICT Ministry announced to be working on structuring the selection process for the assignment of spectrum in the 300 MHz band, which would be the first 5G band in Colombia to be used for mobile services. It is not worthy that through the ICT law, the law 1978 of 2019, the maximization of social welfare was established as the objective of the spectrum assignment. Also, in Colombia, we have implemented different policies to boost universal connectivity, such as TV white spaces and unlicensed access to frequency, which details can be found in the Resolution 105 from the National Spectrum Agency. Related with incentive for the fixed wireless access expansion, I can tell you that Colombia is committed to expanding the coverage of mobile networks to allow to low incomes and remote locations in the national territory. An example of the above was the spectrum auction held in 2019 for the 700 MHz band. In this auction, coverage obligations were included for the assignments to bring the service to 3,658 new hard-to-reach locations through the national territory. Additionally, to facilitate the deployment of these networks, lower cost of the data links necessary to connect new stations that will be deployed in some regions of the country were implemented. Regarding the allocation process, regulatory agencies of some European countries have adopted diverse conditions on the spectrum auctions for 5G. Among these are coverage on roads, trains, and highways, etc., obligations in remote locations, improved bandwidth in cities, rural areas with little coverage, homes without any type of connectivity, obligations to support PPDR. Regulators are also discussing obligations related to capacity and quality of service, which could become important in future spectrum assignment, although defining them and ensuring their implementation would be a significant challenge. Regarding the availability of spectrum at an international level, work is being done to allow the use of sufficiently wide blocks of spectrum in the 3500 MHz band and to allow the use of blocks of at least 1 GHz in the 26 GHz band. It is also important to mention that spectrum managers will require more flexible spectrum access schemes for 5G, especially in the millimeter bands. Regional and even local licensing is likely to become the trend in those high bands. Furthermore, these new technologies are likely to make use of both licensing and unlicensed spectrum. Okay, this was my my presentation. I have more to say. What are the spectrum bands available in Colombia for those operators interested in providing the multi-5G or 5G fixed wireless service? Currently in Colombia, the ICT Ministry is working in structuring the spectrum licensing process in the 3500 MHz band. This would be the first band destined for 5G in Colombia. However, an operator, DirecTV company, offers fixed wireless access service since 2013 through wireless technology, LTE and 4.5G using spectrum in the 2500 MHz band. DirecTV currently offers speeds up to 30 megabits per second. To do this, they use CPE. 94% of the subscribers are indoor. They do not require cable inside the home. The remaining 6% does require it. DirecTV currently has 770 service stations deployed through the country, in which functionalities such as massive MIMO, smart antennas, beamforming, and dynamic transmission modes has been enabled. High order modulations also have been implemented to provide the high charge rates and better spectral efficiency. In the future, we have identified some other bands that would allow the provision of fixed wireless access service. For example, these bands, 600 MHz bands, 26 GHz band, 38 GHz band, and the 70 GHz band, according to the results of the WRC-19 for Region 2. Okay. This was my presentation, so I want to thank you.
Thank you, Miguel Felipe. Thank you very much for your presentation. And then our final, but most important regulator, because of the size in the country, is represented by Mr. Alejandro Navarrete, who is the Spectrum Head for Regulator Federal Telecommunications Institute in Mexico. Mr. Navarrete has over 30 years of experience in the telecommunications sector, both in the private and government areas. And he also has similar experience in teaching telecommunications at private universities, and holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York, and a Bachelor of Science in Electronic and Communications Engineering from Universidad Iberoamericana of Mexico. Welcome on board, and the floor is yours, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Jose. Thank you also to GSA for the opportunity of being here today. The problem of being the last one is that time runs, so I promise to be as quick as possible. First of all, I would like to share with you some general data about Mexico. Mexico has over 126 million inhabitants, more than 35 million households. And of those, we have 21.3 million fixed internet access only for landline. No, one thing that is, I think, important to share is that during 2020, the annual growth was of 12.7%. That because of the pandemic. So the fixed internet penetration in landline is 62. It's also important to say that 87% of those accesses have speeds between 10 and 100 megabits per second. So this figure shows that there is plenty of room for fixed internet access, and here fixed wireless access. There's a chance, opportunity for fixed wireless access to cope with this challenge there. Okay, thank you. Also, mobile internet accesses. We have in Mexico a little bit more than 100 million mobile internet accesses. That's a penetration of 80 lines or subscribers per 100 inhabitants. And we have 4 large mobile network operators, all of them having around 700 megahertz of IMT spectrum. So that's what we have assigned in Mexico, about 700 megahertz of IMT spectrum on the low bands and also mid bands. It's also important to share with you that 88% of the population has 4G coverage at this moment. And those four mobile network operators, the four of them are providing fixed wireless access using LTE technology as well. So what happened? What happened? Oops. Okay, thank you. What happened with fixed wireless access during 2020? Well, through the pandemic, the fixed wireless access accesses grew. And we have some estimates that during 2020, at least we had doubled the number of accesses for fixed wireless access during 2020. Also, the wireless ISPs licenses grew as well, but since they are using unlicensed spectrum, that, as you may know, that limits the number of services provided and also the quality of them. So, for other thing that it's important to share is that for each mobile network operator, each fixed wireless access subscriber represents about 13 mobile subscribers in terms of network resources. That means that the additional amount of spectrum are needed to overcome the requirements of future fixed wireless access for both large operators, the four that I talked about, and also for small local ones, including wireless ISPs. First, 5G deployments focused on fixed wireless access all around the world, especially in the mid-bands. We think that that might be also the case in Mexico, that the first 5G deployments might be also focusing on fixed wireless access. And we believe that in the near future, we are going to see the first launch of 5G network for fixed wireless access as well. It's important also to share with you that two mobile network operators have 150 megahertz of licensed spectrum at the 3.5 gigahertz band. One of them has 100 megahertz for TDD, and the other one 50 megahertz of TDD spectrum. So that's a kind of quick overview of what is going on in Mexico regarding fixed wireless access. Thank you, Jose. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. I'm afraid we are very short of time, so I will ask one single question to all of you for a final comment in 2 minutes per regulator. And I do apologize because we ran out of time already. So the only question is, what, in your perspective, what are the major incentives for operators for introducing fixed wireless access services in your countries? What is the main driver? And what could be the challenge? And each one of you will have only 2 minutes. So I'll start in the same order with first with Alejandro Navarrete that we see here in the screen. So Alejandro, you have 2 minutes to provide your views on this.
Thank you, Jose. Well, one of the main challenges is to have enough amount of spectrum. As I said just before, each fixed wireless access subscriber represents about 13 mobile subscribers. So one of the things that we are looking at is to provide enough spectrum for operators to divide the traffic. So use some frequency bands or at least segments of the bands that they have already assigned for mobile services, and also so they can move as they see fit to move subscribers to an additional band or other band for fixed wireless access. So I think that will be the main challenge, to provide enough spectrum at the right time for operators to provide fixed wireless access on both 4G and 5G technologies. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alejandro. Then we move to Glenn Fallas from Costa Rica to collect your views on this topic.
Thank you, Jose. Taking into account your question, one of the incentives that we have in Costa Rica is the flexibility of the licenses. We have this, as I told, the technology flexibility, and also the possibility of bringing different services with the same license. And another of the incentives, I think that it is important to point out, is that we on the 28 and 26 gigahertz band, we have more than 5 gigahertz of spectrum available. So the millimeter wave spectrum could be also an incentive. And what we have to plan is a good option, considering the different possibilities of bringing services with these different bands. And also we have currently in Costa Rica, one of the projects with the Universal Service Fund is already proving the importance of fixed wireless access, because their customers are served by this technology in the rural areas. So this is a very good incentive option also, because we are funding the fixed wireless access type for delivering the services. So that would be my answer. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And then we move on to Manuel Gonzalez from SUBTEL, Chile. Manuel, I think you need to turn on your camera and microphone. If Manuel is not ready, we go on to Miguel Felipe Anzola from Colombia, Costa Rica, Colombia, ANE. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose Luis. Okay, in Colombia, we have in the ICT law the definition of the technology neutrality. So the operators are who are responsible for choosing the appropriate technology they want to implement. So the incentive to implement fixed wireless access depends on that they can't find the appropriate business model, the business cases that that fit their adequate business plan. But in the other hand, is that as we see in the previous presentations, that with technology for fixed wireless access, there is the possibility to get greater wide bands in the provision of the access to internet than that a user can get it through mobile services. So it's the operators who has the chance to select this appropriate decision to implement. But as we can see, there is a big opportunity to boost the deployment of the infrastructure to using this technology to increase the access to internet. Thank you, Jose Luis.
Thank you very much, Miguel Felipe. And then we give the opportunity to Manuel Gonzalez, in case he's still available.
Yes, yes, thank you, Jose. I think the challenge in general, for wireless, mobile or fixed, is the request for the infrastructure, reduce the restriction in some place. We don't have any difference between mobile and fixed. We I think is the similar situation, the similar focus. Of course, in the case of Chile, FTT, the fund FTT will help to reduce the digital provide by the wireless fixed access. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Manuel. And then we go to the end of our session 3, and I turn to Julian for introducing session 4. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Jose. Thanks also to the speakers in the previous panel. So we are quite behind schedule, and so thanks everyone for staying maybe 15 to 20 minutes more. We will start the vendor panel first with Lars Nielsen from the Global Certification Forum.
Yes, thank you very much, Julian. Now I'll see if I can go and operate the slides. So I'm Lars Nielsen. I'm the CEO and General Manager of GCF, have been that since 2013. Before that, I worked nearly 30 years with Motorola. So I'm actually only in my second job. To give you a little bit about GCF, what are we? We are today more than 300 member companies of GCF. We were established back in 1999, and really the aim with GCF is to eliminate or minimize interoperability issues between devices and networks. And yes, we do run our various certification programs under that aspect. Within the industry, more or less all the big names are participating, particularly if we look on the manufacturer side. We are today more than 150 manufacturer members of GCF. And sorry for the fixed wireless forum members who's a member of GCF, which logo I'm not showing here. And typically we certify around 700 devices per year. What is driving us today? It is really 5G. It's if we look in the networks out there, typically the features within LTE in the networks are stable. All the new things are 5G. It's of course not just giving the operator more mobile broadband capacity, but will open for a myriad of other services when we look long term. Currently, we are certifying against release 15 feature set, but I expect very soon we will start having the first work items from release 16 in the scheme, and release 17 probably will be in the start of 2023. What 5G brings is, or what already started with LTE, but will accelerate, is a lot of industry starting using this technology. Mission critical, we expect to launch mission critical services certification start of next year. Here in June, we launched CV2X certification as part of our connected mobility program, and we are talking like with organizations like 5G ACIA on industrial IoT. One, of course, of the changes which has happened on the infra supplier side is that we see Open RAN is progressing very fast. It is very interesting because it's really changing the infra supplier base from like mainly 5 companies to 30, 40, who knows how many various consortia will provide RAN in the future. And yes, it can be a challenge for us for our device certification, but I think also for the fixed wireless device manufacturers. If we look on the fixed wireless forum, and with GSF on certifications. Based on your previous data, I compared it with I would say what you can compare with of device category in GCF. And yes, we saw you had a lot of suppliers who is not doing GCF certification. We also saw some companies is a member of GCF, which is maybe missing in your data. So I think there's opportunity for both organizations to extend the membership, and like at least based on the March data, yes, we can see there's particularly chipset module manufacturers is of high importance to get as GCF members. So we are going to contact these, and I think also Simon will use his access to the GCF certification database to update the Gambot data. If we go and look on this wireless LAN router certification of these, yes, number of certifications is going up year on year. And we have already here in October of this year exceeded the number of certifications we had last year. What is worthwhile noting is that in 2020, 20% of these devices were supporting 5G. The remaining 80 was only supporting LTE. That has now grown up to 50%. And that is above what we see on the overall certification, where approximately 35% of the certifications so far this year support 5G. In terms of the importance of certifying wireless, fixed wireless devices, today, I think Ericsson in their mobility report, the latest one from June, says that 90% of the operators who's launched 5G offer fixed wireless services, and also of the mobile data volume, it looks like 20% would come from fixed wireless access devices. That is why it's very important these devices is really quality, ensuring a secure and reliable communication and really working flawless with the network. And that is why you as a device supplier maybe need to consider GCF. So thank you very much, and I'll go back to you, Julian.
Thanks a lot, Lars, for this introduction. So we are now going to have a panel discussion. So we'll invite our speakers in addition to Lars. Lars, please stay online. Don't go on mute.
Yeah, I won't run away.
And so I see we have maybe some technical issues. I don't see Willy Wang from Asia Telco or Kevin Ying from ZMTEL being able to join. Fortunately, I can see Mike Wright from Inseego. So Mike, maybe can you introduce yourself a little bit and explain more what Inseego is doing at the moment on the CPE side of things?
Sure, Julian. Yes, my name is Mike Rapp. I'm Vice President of Product Management for Inseego's Fixed Wireless Access CPE product line. With the video that was shown a bit earlier, you could see a few of our fixed wireless products at work, or at least some of the vision that we have for the things that those products can do. Our products are all kind of shown in the GSA FWA device directory now, so you can go there for the details. But just in summary, we have 2 5G indoor Wi-Fi routers, a high gain sub-6 outdoor CPE, our high power millimeter wave outdoor CPE that Brian from US Cellular was referencing, and we have a more industrial focused CPE as well. Our products serve both the carrier consumer segment as well as a variety of enterprise segments as well. And then on top of all of that, we have our suite of cloud services that work with our devices, offering extensive subscriber and device management, as well as security and other services for our customers.
Thanks a lot, Mike. So I will maybe start with a first kind of introductory question. We have mentioned earlier the device market survey we have conducted within the forum. And we have seen that there was a very strong momentum for 4G, 5G fixed wireless access CPE devices with 20% growth, between 2019 and 2020, and even higher growth expecting for 2021. And I would like to know, Mike, if you could maybe give us a little bit more color on what could be the main trends to explain those phenomena. And we also, I think Simon mentioned, a vast majority of the shipments were 4G until now. So what is your perspective on these two things?
So I guess the best way to kind of describe the phenomenon, Julian, is that we see kind of momentum building on a number of fronts and across the various regions that we're participating in. We see definitely a steady stream of RFPs for fixed wireless CPE devices from the wireless carriers from the various regions. And, we think this kind of is attributable to a number of different factors. Naturally, we see that there's a continuing, work from home trend due to the pandemic. And, we certainly believe that that's going to, be continuing, for the foreseeable future, regardless of the pandemic, because I think that it's just been proven now that a large part of the workforce can effectively work from home. In fact, even at Inseego, we're all basically still working remotely, except those that are working in our labs and have to be on site to basically develop and test our products. And then on the enterprise side of things, we're seeing lots of interesting use cases for, especially for 5G FWA devices, and getting lots of traction in the education area, the retail, as far as, and including kind of the defense industry, as well as a number of other areas as well. On top of that, there's also kind of the private networking trend that we see emerging that we believe is also going to add to growth. And I think just in the bottom line with 5G, as 5G comes online, it's just enabling compelling fixed wireless performance that's just going to drive the growth in fixed wireless overall.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And Lars, from your side, because you have shown quickly a slide showing, the kind of pipeline you have with respect to certification and how you see the traction on different technologies. How do you manage this sort of, significant growth, I would say, in this segment?
Yeah, it is as such. When we look a little bit on GCF certifications, it is mainly driven by operators requesting devices to be certified, typically devices they pass on to their customer, and it's not as much things which are sold via retail. And of course, one of the reasons why we do see more fixed wireless devices being certified here now, and particularly the ones supporting 5G, is when we look on the operators, the mobile operators have done huge investment in 5G. They need to monetize that investment, and of course, 5G gives them capacity enhancement for smartphones, for their broadband usage, but fixed wireless access is also one where they can compete partly with the fiber operators. It can quickly be put up at a user's house if there's just 5G network coverage. And I think that's going to drive a lot of business over the next particularly few years, or when you start rolling 5G out in more and more networks. So I think Mike and Inseego is in a good position for the future business.
Very good. And I think one aspect, as you mentioned, is that with 5G fixed wireless access, and it has been mentioned also earlier in the webinar, is this user experience enhancement you can bring with different features in terms of capacity, etc., etc. And this is making really the value proposition to the end user very close to what we can see in very high-speed fixed broadband networks. So you have TV, you have access to Netflix and so on, similar packages, and this is really, really great. But the other side of the coin is that maybe more and more advanced features have to be implemented into the CPEs. And with more features comes more complexity and maybe a need for interoperability testing, which is good for you, Lars, in terms of activities. But I would like to understand maybe how critical it is, Mike, from your perspective, how to manage this complexity and how do you solve that issue for your customer?
That is a great question, Julian. And yeah, this is definitely a very challenging area for us. If you know our history, a few years ago as Novatel, we were basically kind of a one product, one large customer company with our mobile hotspot product. And a few years ago, the company reinvented itself, with the emergence of 5G, and also with the decision to add, this 5G FWA product portfolio to our mobile hotspot side of our business. And so we went down the path of simultaneously developing and launching 5 FWA products with SKUs on both carrier and enterprise sides, as well as being able to address a much larger customer footprint than the one or so customers that we had previously been serving in the mobile hotspot side of things. So our growing pains grew substantially trying to roll out this large portfolio in many different geographic regions with the new technology. So the way that we're addressing it today is naturally we have a sizable internal testing effort to really validate our devices in both the engineering side of things as well as the QA side of things before a product ever leaves our premises. And then beyond that, naturally taking it through all of the various kind of required levels of certification, whether it be regulatory or through the forum certifications like Lars and GCF, or with PTCRB. And then lastly, with the carrier certifications themselves, whether it be on the kind of stock device side of things or on the open device side of things for non-stocked products, there's still a lot of certification testing on either side. And then the other thing too is with the complexity of 5G with all of the bands and combos, it's just created even more complexity. And so once we get through all of those certifications, however, we still do additional testing, especially in regions outside of the US where we've got a pretty broad and well-equipped field support, field engineering staff to actually do local, regional testing of our products in the various regions that we're selling into.
Thank you, Mike, for this comprehensive answer. I think Lars.
May I just quickly add, and
Sure.
as Mike said, yes, 5G, it adds complexity. If you look on GCF, the number of tests we have in our database validated for certification, I just checked last week, I think for 5G, we are up to like 11,000 tests, of course, driven by the various bands. If you look on LTE, which is a mature technology today, we do not even have 11,000 tests validated, the number. And yes, 5G will grow, feature set will grow. So yes, there's huge challenges for manufacturers to verify the product. And of course, we are hoping in GCF to be able to help them with that.
Actually, Lars, how does it work between, because Mike just mentioned that there are also operator type of certification. You have GCF certification. You just said before that some operators are bringing the devices directly to you for some sort of tests. And so the question is how those things are playing together, how are they complementary? And the next question will be, the tests you are conducting are all based on 3GPP test specifications, or there are, I don't know, additional features that could bring value to fixed wireless access, especially, for example, that can be tested as well?
Yeah, it is, our certification is mainly based on 3GPP test cases. However, we are open to bring in test requirements from other organizations. I think a good example is GSMA. GSMA have for eSIM put certain requirements down. We have today certification for this part for the consumer products, and I think any organization which would have specific requirement, yes, GCF would be very open to work with them, get them integrated in our certification scheme. The only thing which we don't want to do is really have things which is proprietary.
Sure.
But we are quite open to that.
I will maybe, maybe shorten a little bit the Q&A part because we are already almost half an hour behind schedule. But I would like to ask maybe Mike, what do you think will be the main drivers in the short term, 2022, 2023, from the market perspective? What your customers are asking you, as a priority to support?
Yeah. So I think that, again, there's sort of like the enterprise side of things, where we're seeing lots of interesting use cases and needs for that side of our business, trends, you might say. I think some of the interesting use cases that we are seeing, just to name a couple, with our outdoor high power millimeter wave product, we've been engaged in some major sports venues, video surveillance, high resolution video feeds for monitoring and things like that. A major automotive maker is also using our high gain outdoor unit to basically drive around their car lots and enable reprogramming of their onboard computers in the vehicle. So there are lots of interesting use cases like that that are emerging on the enterprise side. And then on the carrier consumer side, naturally, I think there's a large kind of table stakes side of CPEs that are required there, whether it be improved RF performance or moving to advanced 5G features like standalone support and other things like that. But then at the same time, with the wireless telcos competing for incumbent access against cable and DSL operators, naturally there's sort of the price point challenge that they have to be able to do that. But then once they win a spot inside of the home, then there's the possibility of actually providing more services and getting some additional ARPU out of that connection. And so, we're seeing things like support on the CPE for a containerized environment where the CPE could host additional services, or things like adding support for mesh Wi-Fi, things like that, where the CPE isn't just a dumb bit pipe, but can actually provide more value to either create additional ARPU for the operator, or even just fit better into the customer's home by fitting into their their broader Wi-Fi mesh system, for instance. So things like that'll definitely add value and drive growth in fixed wireless.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And I would like also to thank you, Lars. I think based on what Mike just said, you are going to be kept busy, so this is good. No need to ask you what is coming next.
Yeah.
Great to be here today, and thank
we're
you
gonna
very
keep,
much.
we're gonna keep Lars busy too.
Yeah, so I would like to maybe close this panel for now and hand over to John. John, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. So let me just do some closing remarks from this webinar today. My name is John Yazley. I'm the vice chair of the GSA 4G-5G FWA Forum. So I think we heard a lot, and it's very hard to summarize everything, but I think some important messages that we really see that fixed wireless is needed to close the digital divide. We really see that demand for broadband has never been greater. And what we experienced in the past 18 months or so has really shown that. Then I think also we see that these 18 months really show that the pace of digitalization really accelerated. So really the digital divide maybe is even increasing, and it's even more urgent to address that. I hope you all got the message that to really close the digital divide, there are multiple technologies that are needed to do that. And fixed wireless is really one extra tool to address that, complementing fiber. I also hope that you perceive that fixed wireless is really a future-proof technology. You saw some very good proof points on technology evolution and what services that are enabled by fixed wireless access, and really the large scale of the 3GPP global ecosystem with large volumes, large number of available devices, an increasing number of 5G devices coming in, and a variety of vendors really driving innovation and openness in the ecosystem. Then I think really there's a great opportunity for monetization for CSPs deploying large-scale fixed wireless access deployments. We see a lot of operators that launch the service, but I think moving to large scale, it's really where the opportunity is. And that really enables CSPs to deploy 5G higher bands beyond large urban areas to more suburban and rural areas. And that really brings an additional step on that business case. So with that technology on suburban rural areas, they'll be also able to monetize later on new use cases. So really, I think this forum is less than 1 year old. We continue to work on our objectives and deliver more information and insights to the market. So really, we can work together to close the digital divide. And when we say we, I mean, it is technology partners, it is operators, it is regulators, policymakers, and others on the broader industry that need to work together. And this collaboration is very important. So thank you again. And let me pass now to Richard to close the session. Thanks.
Many thanks, John. And for everyone who stayed with us throughout the event, thank you very much. Your stamina is awe-inspiring. Just to repeat, if you'd like to download any of these slides, you can do so now. Just hover your cursor over the presentation slide, and you should see a little download button there, and you can download the PDF directly to your computer. We'll share a recording of the full discussion with you immediately after this event, which obviously you can dip into as you see fit. And if you'd like more information on the forum itself, then please do email fwaforum@gsacon.com. And for more information on GSA events and upcoming reports, I would encourage you both to visit the website, sign up for the newsletter, and follow us on our social channels. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Weibo, and WeChat. And with that, again, many thanks to our speakers, many thanks to our sponsors, and many thanks to you for joining us today. Thank you.